Hello, my name is Sophie Otsuru. I'm currently working at Oita University, and today I would like to ask you, how will I know if my students really listen to me, especially in the context of emergency remote teaching? Let me start, however, with a short disclaimer. The vast majority of students do listen to and understand their teachers, but we all have a few learners who are struggling with following instructions. This talk is for them and to make sure that no one is left behind. So I will introduce my issues with giving instructions as my first point. Then I'll move on to the tool that I used to overcome the issue, ICQs, instruction checking questions. It's great, you'll see. Next, I want to share with you my failed attempt at transposing this face-to-face practice to an online environment. And finally, I will let you know what I have changed to adapt to this new environment and invite you to reflect on your own practice, keeping in mind again that you want all your students to achieve the learning outcomes of your course. So, what's wrong with my instructions, I hear you ask? Well, to be honest, I believe I am crystal clear, but it's not always my students' viewpoint. When I give instructions, I do pay attention to my language, making sure that I don't speak too fast or too much, and that I don't use vocabulary that my students are not familiar with. Just kiss. Keep it short and simple, right? Nevertheless, I don't always come across as clear and as concise as I hope to be. When I took the CELTA many moons ago, it was already pointed out to me that giving instructions was my weakest point. And even now, when I have a class observation or during a normal class, I sometimes have students who do not react when I ask them to get started on a task. So what can I do to make sure they are doing what I would like them to do because that's good for them? Well, here is my recommendation that all CELTA certified teachers are told about during their training: ICQs, instruction checking questions. So what are ICQs for, and what are good examples of ICQs? Well, it depends on the situation. So when your students are not listening because they're looking at their phones or they are looking at the window, if you know that Kintaro is not the kind of student who pays a lot of attention in your class, then you can ask, Kintaro, what kind of exercise are we doing now? Listening or reading? Calling them out will bring them back on task. And if they give the right answer, you can move on to ask him, what page is the exercise on, to make sure that he knows what's going on. You might have students who do have their textbooks open, but not on the right page. So you can ask, Kintaro, on what page is the exercise? Now, there are some exercises that spill over 2 pages. And it's not always the case that students think of turning the page over to finish the exercise. So if you're in that case, it is good to ask anyone in the class, how many questions are there in the exercise? If students answer 6 when you know that there should be 8, then you can tell the whole class, please do not forget to turn the page over. So that's really good to make sure that no one misses any questions, especially those who tend to answer questions and finish exercises fairly quickly, that don't really like being reminded that they're not quite done yet. And finally, if you're like me and you know that you have some issues with instructions, then it's always great to ask students, okay, do you have any words that means the same as to get, for example, or as to acquire? And finally, if you're doing a reading exercise or even a vocabulary matching exercise, if you know that some words are a little bit above your student's level, then you might ask the whole class, okay, can you give me a word that means the same as the problematic word? So as you can see, and as Aldao and Calvo remind us, ICQs can be a very powerful tool to check if students understand what is expected of them and are on task. Unfortunately, ICQs do not seem to be a very common practice. I'm not the only one advocating for it, but research has shown, and notably research by Negi 2016 has shown that not many teachers are using ICQs. Indeed, it's very easy to believe if students look like they're studying, everything is fine. In the current context, it's impossible for us to walk around in the classroom and make sure everyone is on task and on the right task. But we shouldn't assume that if students look like they're studying, they are learning something that is useful to them. So now you know how grateful I am to know about ICQs and what a potent and yet easy tool it is to use. You might now understand why I wanted to use them when we had to make the transition to online teaching. So I asked my usual ICQs, especially when I had no reactions and no way whatsoever to know whether students were doing their exercises or not. So the first time I asked students, what page is the exercise on? Generally speaking, as a class, it didn't work quite well. As I mentioned previously, not so many teachers actually use ICQs. As a result, not so many students are familiar with them. So they're quite taken aback when a teacher is asking, like, what page is the exercise on, or how many questions there are in the exercise. They think I've gone mad. No, I have not gone mad. I just want to make sure you know what we have to do. And so when I did that online and I asked, okay, so what page is the exercise on? I had no replies at all. Complete silence. No one typing on the chat. So I tried to ask another ICQ, which might be a little bit more challenging. How many questions are there in the exercise? That sounds precisely. That sound precisely. No sound. Still silence. So then I didn't give up. And I asked, okay, guys, can you give me a synonym? Can you give me a word that has the same meaning as the first word of the example that was in the exercise? And I got a few answers as private messages on the chat. That was with one class. I tried to do that with another class, and same result, surprisingly enough. So honestly, it was a car crash. After trying a few times, I got mildly annoyed and I asked students, why are you not answering my questions? And what I was told was that A, they said they can't hear me well. They can't hear me well because I don't have a good Wi-Fi connection, or they don't have a great Wi-Fi connection. And it's true, actually, that oral comprehension in a second language is much harder over the phone or over the internet than in a face-to-face setting. So I can understand that. Some of them, fewer, I have to say, just did not have the textbook. So they might have listened to my instructions, but they have not acted upon it. So they were not on any pages at all. So there was no way for them to know what page they had to be on, and it was not relevant to them. So that one is on them, not on me. And finally, I had a couple of students that just did not reply. I also asked the same students to turn on their cameras, and then no reply at all. So that is very problematic. It's the students that actually need help the most that are the hardest to reach. And ICQs didn't help in that sense, unfortunately. So what did I do to make sure that my students were on task? Well, remember, the first issue students mentioned was that the Wi-Fi connection was an issue. And as they couldn't hear what I was saying, I decided to type the instructions on the chat, and that works for any platform that you might be working on, in note forms, only essential information. Many students, especially those with lower listening skills, were thankful for that initiative. The second change that I implemented was to model the first question and answer with one of the best students in class instead of asking ICQs. I feel like it's working, and I know that at least one student in the class knows what to do. That's a start. But to conclude, I'm still unsure whether students are really listening to me in this online environment. The final words are for you. I would like to ask you, what do you do to make sure everyone in your class is really on task, especially since we can't really know what they are doing? Thank you very much for listening to this talk, and I look forward to your comments and feedback. If you have any brilliant ideas, please share. Here are my references. Thank you very much.